Whenever I listen to contemporary songs, they always follow kind of a standard format. There's 3, maybe 4 verses. After each verse, there's always the refrain. After the last verse, whether it's the 3rd or 4th, the refrain is usually sung 2 times. And the average person listening to music today can kind of be focused for about 3.5 minutes. So how long is the average song? About 3.5 minutes. That's the format. Most psalms are kind of short, and they allowed people to participate in them and actually to memorize them. Today's psalm is Psalm 78. It's much, much longer. And you should really pay attention to the structure of the psalm. And it's called God restoring us and God blessing the Israelites and kind of rebuilding them or giving them a chance to come back to Him. So read Psalm 78. Now it's really, really long. I'm not going to read it today like I usually do. There's 3 parts to it. Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. They're the Roman numerals. So that's how Psalms are broken down into parts. In the first part, there are 3 sections. And the end of each section uses the word God's deeds. God's deeds, God's deeds. So that's kind of the introduction to Psalm 78. Then there are 2 long sections in 78, and it's part 2 and part 3, and they're both about the same length. The first, or the second part of Psalm 78 deals with the Jewish people escaping from Egypt. It deals with the Exodus. The second part deals with the Jewish people wandering into the promised land of Canaan. Great. You'll be able to see that in the Bible when you take a look at Psalm 78. Now here we go. Part 2 and Part 3 follow the same pattern. There's 4 sections in each one. Those sections are called Section A, Section B, Section C, Section D. And they're all marked out in the Bible, so take a look at it. Section A talks about some gracious deed that God commits or does for the Jewish people. Great. Section B, well, that's the rejection or the rebellion of the Jewish people against God. Section 3, it's God punishing them. It's divine punishment. And then Section 4 is God giving them a second chance and saying, if you come back to me, then we'll be able to rebuild this covenant, this relationship that you have. That's Part 2. You go to Part 3, follows the same pattern. There's some gracious or generous act on God's part. There's rejection and rebellion by the Israelites, divine punishment, and then God offering them a second chance and hoping they come back so He can rebuild them. So read Psalm 78. The verse that we used at Mass this weekend comes right from it, as well as some of the verses that we used at Mass for the responsorial psalm. You know, God's hand feeds us, and He feeds us with the finest bread. And that's exactly what Jesus is talking about in the gospel. But also that ties into our first reading today, how God fed the Jewish people with meat, quail, and bread, some mysterious hoarfrost-like substance that comes down from the heavens. Great. Come back tomorrow. We're going to be taking a look at the second reading from Sunday's Mass. God bless.